Hello, everyone. It is Sunday, August 11th, and you're looking at a live view of our Falcon 9 rocket, awaiting a 7:02 p.m. Pacific Time launch from Space Launch Complex 4 East in Vandenberg, California. Today's launch marks SpaceX's 76th mission of 2024 and 360th overall Falcon 9 mission to date. My name is Ronnie Foreman, and I'm a commercial sales manager here at SpaceX, joining you from Hawthorne, California, for our live launch coverage of the Arctic Satellite Broadband Mission, also known as ASBM, led by Space Norway. With just 13 minutes and 43 seconds to launch, let's dive right in. On board Falcon 9 today are two Northrop Grumman-built satellites, ASBM-1 and ASBM-2. These satellites will deliver continuous commercial and military broadband capacity to the Arctic region above the 65-degree north latitude. Today's mission is particularly exciting for SpaceX because this is the first time we will be launching to the highly elliptical Molniya orbit. In this orbit, the apogee, or the furthest point from Earth, is about 40,000 kilometers away, and the perigee, or the closest point, can be as close as 600 kilometers. The orbit is also positioned around the Earth by fine-tuning the inclination and argument of perigee, so that the apogee is as far north as possible. Now, the closer a satellite is to the Earth during its orbit, the faster it's moving. So that really high apogee allows vehicles in this orbit to spend a significant amount of time over the high latitudes of the Northern Hemisphere, making passes about every 12 hours, or twice per day. Then, with a perigee of just 600 kilometers, the satellite is moving much, much faster, and it zips across the southern hemisphere before popping back up to the northern side. That careful balance of timing and orbital positioning means that in the Molniya orbit, just two satellites are able to provide around-the-clock coverage of these northern latitudes. We have a great illustration of that orbit coming up, so with that, let's learn a little bit more about today's payload and mission.
The evolving operational environment drove an increased capability needed in the Arctic region. And now that the Arctic is more accessible, maintaining peace in the Arctic region is of the utmost importance. The partnership with
With the launch today of the ASBM satellites embarking Viasat's GX10 payloads, we take an important step in providing broadband connectivity into the Arctic region. The GX10 payloads represent an important step in Viasat's evolutional network, providing broadband connectivity for mobility users.
The Falcon 9 on your screen is a two-stage rocket developed and manufactured by SpaceX, known for its safe, reliable, and cost-effective access to space. It is the most flown U.S. launch vehicle ever, and also the first and currently the only orbital-class rocket capable of reflight. Now, starting at the top of the vehicle, which you can barely see through the fog there on your screen, we've got our carbon composite payload fairing, a protective shell that encapsulates the payload being sent to space. Just to provide a sense of scale here, the payload fairing that you can, again, just barely see on your screen is about 17 feet in diameter. It has enough room inside to hold an average-sized fire truck. The fairing is made up of two halves that will separate and jettison away from the vehicle once Falcon 9 reaches space. Today's payloads are, of course, the ASBM satellites, which were manufactured by Northrop Grumman. Continuing down the vehicle, we have our second stage. The second stage is powered by a single Merlin vacuum engine, or MVAC for short. After stage separation, the MVAC engine will ignite and carry the payloads to its final orbit. The Falcon 9's first and second stages are connected by the black interstage, which houses the MVAC engine's skirt and the system that decouples the two stages during stage separation. Below the first stage, which is powered by 9 Merlin engines, that provides the initial thrust to lift Falcon 9 off the ground and move the vehicle through the lower, thicker parts of the atmosphere. Each of these Merlin 1D engines delivers about 190,000 pounds of thrust at sea level, which gives Falcon 9 a combined 1.7 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. After stage separation, stage 1, which is also called the booster, will return to Earth using a combination of those Merlin sea-level engines and 4 titanium grid fins located at the top of the booster, which will guide it during its re-entry. The Falcon 9 first stage is also equipped with 4 landing legs that deploy just before landing to allow for vertical touchdown on either a landing pad or drone ship. For today's mission, we will be attempting to land this booster on our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, which is currently stationed on the Pacific Ocean. This mission marks this booster's 22nd launch and landing, having previously flown Crew 1 and 2, Sirius XM-8, CRS-23,
for strong back retract.
IXB, Transporter 4 and 5, Globalstar FM-15, ISI Aeros C3, Korea 425, Maxar 1, and 10 Starlink missions. I'm not going to lie, that is one heck of a resume. And of course, prior to the start of our webcast today, the Falcon 9 team performed functional checkouts for both the ASBM payloads and the launch vehicle. At T-minus 38 minutes, the team concluded their go.
Strongback retract has started.
There's confirmation that the strongback is beginning to pull away from the vehicle. And of course, at this point in our launch lead up, the pre-valves between the first stage and the second stage are open. At the T-minus 7 minute mark, engine chill began to prepare the Merlin engines for flight. The first stage is connected to a launch mount at the base of the transporter erector, or TE, which is that truss structure you can see next to Falcon 9. We heard the nets call out that we are preparing for retraction here in just a couple of minutes. Just barely through the fog, you can see there that the strong back pulled away from the rocket by about 2 degrees. Now at T-0, the ground hydraulic systems will pull the TE all the way back from 2 degrees to 45 degrees away from Falcon 9 so that it can have sufficient clearance to move away from the launch pad. At this point in the countdown, both the first and second stages are nearly fully loaded with 1 million pounds of rocket-grade kerosene fuel and liquid oxygen. Both stages will finish propellant loading about a minute apart from each other, so we're listening in now for those callouts from Mission Control.
Stage 1 LOX load complete.
There's confirmation that we have finished loading liquid oxygen on board the first stage, and again, we are standing by for the same call out for stage 2 in just about 50 seconds. You can, of course, always keep an eye on our mission countdown right in the middle at the bottom of your screen. That periodic venting sound you hear is normal. At this point in the countdown, we are venting chilled gas from above the LOX tank to maintain constant pressure in the tank as needed. Typically, for a launch, you'd be able to see that liquid oxygen condensing into clouds around the vehicle, but today, the best indication we have is that audio feedback coming from the launch pad. We are standing by for that LOX call out on board stage 2. At which point Falcon 9 will be fully loaded with 1 million...
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
There's that confirmation that we have 1 million pounds of fuel on board Falcon 9. Now the next call out we're listening for is at T-minus 60 seconds that Falcon 9 has entered startup mode. That, of course, will mean that the rocket's autonomous internal flight computers have taken over the launch countdown. Then, just inside of T-minus 2 seconds, we will light the M1D engines for liftoff. At this time, the ASBM payload continues to be healthy, and the Falcon 9 team is tracking no issues on the rocket. The range is green, and weather continues to look good, albeit a bit foggy.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Confirmation that Falcon is in startup.
LD is go for launch.
And there you heard that our launch director has given the final go for today's mission. So at T-minus 37 seconds and counting, all systems are ready for the launch of Falcon 9. Let's sit back and watch as the Falcon rocket takes the ASBM mission to space.
T-minus 15 seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. And liftoff of Falcon 9. Go ASBM. Vehicle pitching downrange. Chamber pressure is nominal.
That incredible view, of course, means that at T-plus 33 seconds and counting, Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Space Launch Complex 4 East, carrying the 2 ASBM satellites. Now, after clearing the tower, as you can see a little bit on your screen
Power and
here,
telemetry are nominal.
There's good confirmations that our power and telemetry on board Falcon 9 are looking good. At this point, we're gimbaling the engines on the booster to initiate a slight roll maneuver.
Vehicle supersonic.
Call out there that Falcon 9 is moving faster than the speed of sound.
Max Q.
And there's confirmation that we have passed through the period of maximum aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. As Falcon 9 accelerates through the thicker, lower atmosphere, the air density decreases, but we're picking up speed as we head to space, which means we're shifting the pressure balance on the rocket as we ascend. When Falcon 9 passes through max Q, the point of maximum aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle, the air density has now lowered faster than the increasing speed of the vehicle. Great views there as Falcon 9 continues on its way to space. Now, coming up shortly, we'll have 3 events in quick succession, and we should hear all of these called out by Mission Control, starting with MECO, followed by stage separation, and then SES-1. Main engine cutoff, or MECO for short, will shut down all 9 M1D engines on the first stage to slow the vehicle down in preparation for stage separation, which is when the first and second stages of Falcon 9 separate from one another. After Stage 1 shuts down its engines and separates from the second stage, the booster will begin to make its way back to land. And the second engine will undertake SES-1, or Second Engine Start 1, where we light the MVAC engine on the second stage for the first time. Let's keep an eye out for all of these events happening in just about 5 seconds.
MECO. Stage separation confirmed.
Impact startup.
Awesome views and confirmation that we have had main engine cutoff, stage separation, and of course, second engine start 1. So the next major call out we're looking for is fairing separation. Right now, the fairing is protecting the ASBM payloads from the environments on ascent. But once we reach the vacuum of space, they're no longer needed. So at that point, the halves separate and are jettisoned away.
Fairing separation confirmed.
Great confirmation and views of fairing separation on your screen there. We will, of course, be attempting to retrieve those fairing halves once they fall back to Earth with our recovery vessel Go Beyond, which is also currently standing by in the Pacific Ocean. Coming up here in just a little bit more than 2 minutes, we are anticipating entry burn, which should last about 20 seconds for our first stage booster. But right now, of course, on your screen at T plus 4 minutes and 3 seconds into this launch, you have great views of your MVAC engine on the right-hand side of the screen, taking the ASBM satellites to their intended orbit. The next major milestone we're tracking for the first stage is the entry burn, which should begin at T plus 6 minutes and 22 seconds. To start the entry burn, we will relight 3 of the M1D engines on board the first stage, which is essentially similar to pumping the brakes to slow down the vehicle as it passes back into the Earth's atmosphere. That entry burn will help to reduce the heat generated from the friction of the atmosphere and reduces aerodynamic.
Nominal trajectories.
Good confirmation there that both the first and second stages are on nominal trajectories. So as you can see on your screen at this point in the flight, the second stage is still picking up speed and heading to orbit. On the left-hand side of your screen, you have a great view down the side of Falcon 9 and 2 of those titanium grid fins just atop the booster preparing for landing. Again, the Falcon 9 first stage supporting today's mission is performing this entry approach for the 22nd time. MVAC continuing to pick up speed and altitude in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. The engines on board the first and second stage are actually quite similar, but the Merlins on the first stage are optimized for sea level. These achieve 190,000 pounds of thrust each during both ascent and descent. The MVAC engine, by contrast, has a much wider nozzle, which you can see on the right-hand side of your screen right now, and is optimized to 220,500 pounds of thrust in the vacuum of space. One of the next major milestones we're tracking here is
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
There's confirmation that we have entry burn startup on board our first stage on the left-hand side of your screen.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
There's confirmation of entry burn shutdown on the first stage, and with that we should have just about a minute until we hear SECO 1, or second engine cutoff 1, for the MVAC engine on board the second stage. Shortly after that, we'll hear the call out for the landing burn, which is the final burn of the Falcon 9 booster.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
Good callouts from Mission Control as first stage continues back toward Earth.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance.
Good callouts from
Stage 1 transonic.
From Mission Control, and with that last one, we know that Falcon 9 continues on its way back to Earth. Great views of those grid fins steering through the atmosphere as well. As a reminder, we are attempting to land this booster today on our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, which is currently stationed in the Pacific Ocean.
Stage 1 landing burn.
There's confirmation that landing burn has begun, and we are expecting this burn to last for about 20 seconds in total.
Nominal orbit insertion.
Landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
That was a beautiful touchdown of our Falcon 9 rocket. And of course, in the midst of all that, we also heard confirmation of second engine cutoff and nominal orbital insertion from Mission Control. Great views of MVAC up there in space with our 2 ASBM satellites on board. And as a reminder, this was our 22nd launch and landing for the first stage we flew today, marking SpaceX's 318th recovery of an orbital class rocket, including the first stage landings for both Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. Now we are going to enter roughly a 28-minute coast phase, and then we'll be back for second engine start 2, or SES2, of the MVAC engine on board the second stage at about the T plus 36-minute mark. So for now, kick back and enjoy some space tunes. We'll see you back here for SES2. Hello and welcome back to our live coverage of the Arctic Satellite Broadband Mission. We are back from our first coast phase just in time for second engine start 2. In just about 30 seconds, we'll begin a roughly 40-second burn of the second stage MVAC engine, which you've got a great view of right now on your screen. This will be the second burn of our MVAC tonight. The first burn took place at around the T plus 2 minutes and 45 second mark and lasted for 5.5 minutes. This additional burn will place the ASBM payloads into the desired orbit for payload deployment.
MVAC started.
Confirmation of SES-2. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the MVAC engine shown on your screen has a much wider nozzle than the sea-level M1D engines on board the first stage booster. That's in order to give this engine optimal thrust performance in space. At full power, MVAC is capable of 220,500 pounds of thrust in vacuum. Also, as we mentioned earlier tonight, the ASBM satellites are carrying both military and civilian payloads. The two satellites on board Stage 2 are ASBM-1 and ASBM-2. Confirmation of second engine cutoff 2 there from Mission Control.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And confirmation of good orbit insertion for ASBM-1 and 2, which are still currently attached to the second stage. Those two satellites are hosting Viasat's GX-10A and 10B Ka-band payloads, which will extend Viasat's high-speed global network across the Arctic region. In addition to the two Viasat Ka-band payloads, the spacecraft are also hosting payloads for the Norwegian Armed Forces, the European Space Agency, and the U.S. Space Force. A radiation monitoring instrument built by the Norwegian company IDEAS and ESA, which will gather information about or EPSR payload, is also on board for the U.S. military. And finally, an X-band payload for the Norwegian Armed Forces. With that, we have roughly 4 minutes left in this coast before arriving to our first payload deployment. Then we'll have another 5-minute coast before arriving at our second payload deployment. So for that, we'll kick it back over to the Space Tunes and see you back here at T plus 42 minutes. We are now just about T plus 42 minutes into today's mission, and coming up next, we have the deployment of the first ASBM satellite. Now, just a quick recap of today's mission so far. We had an on-time liftoff at 7:02 p.m. Pacific, followed by stage separation about 2.5 minutes after launch. The first stage booster then returned to Earth and successfully landed on the drone ship Of Course I Still Love You, about 8.5 minutes after takeoff. We've also had 2 successful ignitions and shutdowns of our second stage MVAC engine. On board stage 2 today, we had the ASBM payload, which consisted of 2 Northrop Grumman-built satellites, ASBM-1, which we just heard confirmation of deployment there, and ASBM-2. With that confirmation, we are headed back into another coast, but we'll see you back here in just about 4 minutes for the deploy of ASBM-2. you're waiting for the deployment of the second ASBM satellite. Great views from up in space, and you can see ASBM-1 over on the left-hand side of your screen. Its deployment was just about 5 minutes ago.
ASBM-2 payload deploy confirmed.
There we heard from Mission Control and have great views on our screen that we have had successful deployment of the ASBM-2 satellite. Now, with that confirmation, we will be bringing today's webcast to a close. Today's mission marks SpaceX's 360th overall mission to date and 76th mission of the year. We want to thank Space Norway for entrusting us with today's mission and all of you for joining us today. If you are interested in more launch coverage, be sure to check out spacex.com/launches for the most up-to-date information. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.